All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Art at Home Live. My name is Christina, and I'm the Family Program Coordinator at the Vancouver Art Gallery. So I have the very cool job of looking and thinking and talking about artworks with families that come into the gallery. And of course, the best way to look at artwork is to be with the artwork, to see the paint up close, to walk around all the way around sculptures or carvings. But for now, I'm so thankful that we can connect together here on Zoom. And I'm going to guess that a lot of you have used Zoom by now, but if you haven't, you can see at the bottom of your screen in the center, there's a little button that says chat. So throughout the session, we want to hear your ideas and questions and thoughts and input. So feel free to click on that chat button and you can add those thoughts and ideas, or you can even click on the chat button right now and say hi to everyone joining us. So this session today is about finding ways to express who we are, and who we are is shaped by where we live, where we work, where we play, and where we learn. And where I am right now and where the Vancouver Art Gallery was built is on Indigenous land. And Indigenous means the first people to live on, to steward the land. And we are on the ancestral lands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people, which is unceded territory, which means that no part of this land has been offered an agreement to the government of Canada. So did you know that October is Islamic History Month across Canada? Today we're celebrating Islamic heritage. So I want to start by thanking our partners of this project, Aslam Azadeh from Simon Fraser University's Center for Comparative Muslim Studies, for their dialogue, for their efforts, and their kind support towards making the session possible. Thank you. And you know what? You can check out some of the incredible work that they do all the time to celebrate Islamic history. And I'll post the link right here in the chat. So we also want to thank our lead sponsors, Canada Life, for their support of art education at the Vancouver Art Gallery through Art at Home programming. All right, so today we get to speak with a very cool artist named Doaa Jamal. Hey Doaa, how you doing?
Hey, I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. I'm glad that you're here with us today. I'm excited to hear about your work.
Oh, thank you.
So we're going to talk today about how artists use shapes, symbols, and images to reclaim their cultural and spiritual identities. That's saying a lot. So let's talk about what that means. So when I think about what that means, I think about all the different words. So reclaim is like to take something into your own hands as it's uniquely yours. And culture, it could be described as things that people in a community share in daily life, like specific foods that you eat, clothes, music, values, and beliefs that are passed down from family members. When I think of the word spiritual, it's like an inner relationship to a higher power bigger than ourselves. And then the big word here is really identity. Identity is what makes you you. So, like, how do you think? What do you believe? What every day? So we could also think of this as, like, another way to say this is, how do artists use shapes, symbols, and images to share who they are in their own unique ways? But I'm going to ask you, Doaa, what you think about what does reclaiming cultural and spiritual identity mean to you?
That's such a big question. For me specifically, and from my own experience, I think it means something like recreating your own home, especially if you know, were born in a different place that you could call home and then happen to be moving around the world. I think so with that, I think it means creating your own home without boundaries or borders. It's how we can always feel safe within ourselves. And that could be by the way you carry yourself, the way you speak, the way you just feel really good about your own skin culture, where you come from. I think that's all could be ways on how you could reclaim, recreate your own identity or whatever that means to you.
Thank you, Doaa. So actually, we're going to talk about a project that Doaa uses to, well, uses art actually to do things like reclaim what is important to you and who you are and express and share who you are. Let's take a look at a project that Doaa did in collaboration. Don Rivera, Adrian Neufeld, and Vancouver Art Biennale. So maybe what we can do is kind of take a look together first, and then I'm going to ask you some questions about what you all think. Don't forget, you can add your answers into the chat. And then Doaa, maybe you can speak a little bit to this work and the process of collaboration here. So for everyone, well, what's the first thing you notice about this artwork? That's how I always like to start. What's the first thing that you notice? And you can add your answers into the chat if you like. So when I look at this work, the first thing that I notice, oh, well, Lee is saying it's colorful. I was going to say exactly that. My eye is drawn to the variety of blues, but then the contrasts of those reds and kind of orangey yellows as well. So here you notice mountains, leaves, the designs at the bottom. We're going to talk a little bit more about what all of these different pieces mean. So also you can think about, what do you think this work is made out of? How do you think it was made? Like, I don't know if you can tell just by looking at the image what was used to create this piece. Pope has noticed that it's woven. So this is absolutely a weaving, and it's specific materials used as well, I believe. And maybe Doaa, you want to talk a little bit more about this work now and talk through your process of collaboration in creating this work.
Definitely. First of all, this rug was weaved by two wonderful weavers, Dawn Livera and Adrian Neufeld. So at the beginning, when we were like brainstorming and stuff like that, we wanted this rug, which we called Find What You Need, to be an experience for individuals to find their inner peace. So we selected images and symbols. Some are from our own experiences and identities, and some are borrowed from other cultures that we either have connections to or we respect and value. So first thing you see is the wonderful landscape of the mountains of BC, which all of us, the three artists, live in. And then if the body is engaged for a prayer or a moment of stillness, the individual is rewarded with a personalized experience through prana, life force chakras, which translate to a wheel and refers to energy points in your body. This first emerged from the Hinduism faith. Following that practice, we created some symbols that are familiar to us and for others. For example, if you were to see at the top of the rug, which we like to refer to as like the focal point, you will find a medicine wheel borrowed from the indigenous cultures with Arabic text that reads mental, spiritual, emotional, and physical, arranged in the 4 quadrants. These 4 states, perfectly balanced, represent the indigenous and globally recognized dimension of wellness, right? So we wanted to like tap into each of these elements to almost like a check-in with yourself, like how am I doing mentally, how am I doing emotionally, and so on and so forth. And another example of symbol that we used in there would be the horizontal pattern that you see at the bottom of the rug, that's like in red. And that pattern is really dear to my heart because every time we would go to Yemen, where my parents are from, during summer breaks, you will see every building having the same pattern, kind of like on top of their windows. They, of course, vary from one building to another. And these will be like houses and like storefronts and so forth. So you'll always see this pattern like every block you walk in. Yeah.
Thank you so much for speaking so generously as well to this work. And I love hearing about that collaborative effort and what you learned about each other and how you supported each other in the making of this project. So I don't know if you want to speak a little bit more to, I know you were speaking with me about a talk that was shared that really impacted, or really resonated with you. I'm thinking about identity as experiences and experiences as being local. And thinking about rituals and relationships and restrictions that frame this identity.
Yeah, this talk was by Tai Selassie, I believe, and she has it coded right there. All experience is local and all identity is experience. Don't ask me where I'm from, ask me where I'm local. So she proposes a 3-step test, which is wonderful. I think I listened to this talk like a million times, just like kind of wrap my head around it. Rituals, what are the things that you do that shape your day? whether it's your coffee, whether it's your family time, whether it's the way you host your friends. I'm pretty sure that's like different from culture to culture. And then the second R is relationships. Who are the people you play with, learn from, and talk to? For example, I have a beautiful circle of friends here in Vancouver, BC. I also have another group of friends that are in Jubail, Saudi Arabia, where I grew up and was born, which I FaceTime like every once in a while. And then whenever like there's special occasions, stuff like that, I will have the pleasure to FaceTime my extended family in Yemen. So all of these relationships really mean something to me, right? And then we have the third R, which is restrictions. How are you treated by other people? Where you live? Does the way people treat you make it harder to be who you really are? Of course, with nowadays, where we see lots of racism, discrimination, all of that. So these are restrictions, right? Or it could be actual physical restriction where you can't be with your loved ones because of any possible reason. So this talk by Taye Selassie, which I recommend you all go watch it. It really helped me reshape my identity. I was born and raised in Saudi Arabia as a Yemeni citizen. And even though I consider Saudi home, Saudi Arabia doesn't really consider me a citizen. So I have always struggled with what home should feel like, right? And I will always hear my parents say things like how immigrants will never really feel what home feel like. And, as a child, that really stuck with me. I was like, why am I missing on this such a deep belonging feeling? So I think after I watched the talk, it made me discover this framework that I can kind of take and reclaim what home could feel and look like. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Doaa. I'm going to put someone has asked to pop that talk into the chat.
Oh, yes.
So I'll do that right now. And that was at the TEDx Global session in 2014. Mm-hmm. So
I think we lost you, Christina. Oh no, we lost Christina. Sure, she'll be back in a second. Are you back?
I'm back. Hi, sorry about that.
Oh, good.
So shall we take a look at the project that you created in collaboration with Simon Fraser's Center for Comparative Muslim Studies and Vancouver Mural Festival?
Yeah, absolutely. This is like one of the best projects I got to work on, thanks to Center of Comparative Muslim Studies, specifically thank you to Aslam. Okay, so at first, we were looking to create a design that would represent Muslims in Vancouver. It immediately felt like an overwhelming task because one piece of work would never do any justice to the complexity and diversity of this community. So I took a step back and I decided to design a mural for all of the minorities in the city. I wanted to illustrate one of the many struggles minorities and immigrants face, cultural and identity differences. These differences at the beginning might feel like a burden when they don't fit into a society you're trying to adjust to. You don't have to justify your culture, tradition, and identity. We're also different for a reason, and that's what the verse from the Quran says. It says, we have created you from male and female, and we've made you into tribes and nations so you may know each other. So I think it just shifts our attention to the importance of our differences, the beauty of it, and everything. I remember while I was painting the mural with the help of the other part of the communities, an Iraqi man was walking by with his dinner in his hand, and he turned to me and he was like, this is Arabic script. I'm like, yeah, can you read it? And he said, yeah, I kind of can read it. I'm from Kufa, the city, where this script is originating from, Kufa in Iraq. So we had like a long chat about what that means. And I remember like the smile on his face. It was like, I'm just like coming home from work and I'm just having my dinner. And I just can't believe that I have a little piece of home in my neighborhood. And I think that's what art and culture do. They bring a little bit of ease into our everyday life. Whatever your culture is, whatever it means, like even when you have your comfort food, right? That brings you some ease in your day. So yeah, like just the process of this mural meant so much to me. As you can see, like I'm using some pattern on the left side, and that pattern usually used on a lot of Middle Eastern textiles kind of thing. So I made like a stencil where I could just like copy paste it or like just repeat it over and over on the wall. I borrowed the geese symbol from indigenous culture, and they usually use it to represent community. And that's what I intended to like represent in this piece.
Thank you for sharing. I mean, I saw this work and, well, I think, first of all, thank you for sharing that experience of creating it and how that was a community connection for you, which is why public art is so important, and making all of the things that you're speaking about right now very visible, right, to make those connections. So I saw this piece and I was just so inspired by the many different layers that you're bringing together, how you're using text, symbolism, even color. How did you decide on the colors to use?
That's a funny story. I was told that the wall is going to be red. So I was stuck with the wall being red. And then I was like, okay, I might as well use it for my own advantage. It will be like, because if you ever seen this mural, it's in an alley. It's not really in a main street or anything. So let's say you walk and there, like you would see right away, even though it's small and in a corner. I was like, okay, red is great. Like red really grabbed attention, really brighten up the alley. And then I'll just use like any complementary colors that go well with it, right? And then I was looking at it, I was like, it looks a little bit flat being on a wall. I wanted it to be a little bit more standing out. So I added some like 3D almost kind of layers to it. Yeah.
And there's a question in the chat asking if you could just state what the mural says.
I will say in Arabic and in English. In Arabic, it says, إِنَّا خَلَقْنَاكُم مِّن ذَكَرٍ وَأُنثَى وَجَعَلْنَاكُمْ شُعُوبًا وَقَبَائِلَ لِتَعَارَفُوا. In English, it translates to, we have created you from male and female, and we've made you into tribes and nations, so you may know each other. Yeah. And it says in the left side of the mural. I wanted to make sure it also translates so people can read it.
So I asked Doaa if she wanted to come and visit the Vancouver Art Gallery and see if there's any works that resonate, that really are interesting to you, that align with what you're expressing and what you're stating in your work, what you're embodying with your work as well. And Doaa chose an incredible work by the artist Diana Akiadi. And maybe Doaa, you might want to take like a sip of water there. I see you got a sip of water.
Yeah, got it.
Talking for a minute. Diana Akiadi is very interested in imagery and symbolism and how images travel around the world and how they're perceived by other cultures, often in ways that are misleading or misunderstood. So maybe Doaa, just a few words, you might want to talk about why you chose this work, and then maybe we'll have Deanne speak for herself about her work.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that got my eyes was the overall shape. From far away, I kind of looked like a map to me, but I wasn't quite sure till I got closer. Um, and then the colors were also like very fascinating. The layers, like I knew there's like it's almost like a coming out of the wall. Like there's a lot of depth into it. So I read the description, right, and then reread it again, and then I remember going like, so you're telling me you took pictures and illustrations that misrepresented your homeland in so many different ways and made this beautiful piece. And I'm pretty sure she will talk a little bit more about it in the video. But I think like it really shows how powerful art is. Like Deanne took something that looked very strange and violent in her own, like that's how she described it, and repurposed it for something so beautiful. Her work really made me think of all the other cultures that were and still misrepresented to this day.
So Deanne was born in Jakarta, Indonesia, to a West Javanese father and an English-Canadian mother, and spent her childhood moving between Jakarta, Hong Kong, London, and Washington. So as you can see here in the slide, her work is asking big questions, like kind of like I mentioned before, where do images, shapes, and symbols come from? How do they move around the world? And how do images, shapes, and symbols influence how we understand the world around us? And like you were mentioning, often those understandings are false. And so let's take a look at this video that was created by the Richmond Art Gallery in 2016. And it's Deanne doing an interview about an exhibition that was called Cultural Conflations. It was created by Melanie Devoy. And actually, the Richmond Art Gallery has a show coming up called Selected Stories 1980 to 2020, which is opening at the end of this month, that also features a work of Deanne's, which I'll put a little bit of information in the chat about that show. But let's take a look at the video of Deanne Achiati introducing her work.
So I'm originally from Jakarta, Indonesia, but I grew up moving around quite a bit, and I ended up going to art school in New York City at the Cooper Union. And I'm of mixed heritage, so my mother's from Ottawa, she's English-Canadian, and my father's from West Java, Indonesia. And so a lot of what I've always been interested in is different perceptions of the world. Having moved around quite a bit and having these two different cultural spaces in my home, I've always been curious about how one perceives the other. And so a lot of my work in this exhibition is informed by that. So I'm really interested in looking at, for instance, coming from Indonesia, how has Indonesia been depicted historically, and specifically how has Java been depicted historically? What are the inaccuracies and misperceptions there, and how can I work with those types of images? So one of the things that I studied in school was printmaking, and printmaking includes woodblock and etching and lithography and silkscreen. And printmaking was always a method of reproducing images and text, so it was the mass media of its day. And one thing that I'm really interested in printmaking is not just the technique, but kind of the history of how images have been distributed and circulated, where they exist in the world and how people receive them, and how that it starts to inform how people understand the world. So a lot of the works in this exhibition are based in looking at printed images and printed objects and illustrations, and trying to understand how these might have informed the perceptions of particularly Indonesia, but also Java. A lot of these works start from looking at images. So often in my working process, I find something that I'm struck by. It might be a photograph, it might be a textile, it might be a wallpaper, or it might be a news article. And then that kind of sparks me to look more into that image and to develop some work around it.
Thank you again, Richmond Art Gallery, for allowing us to share this. let's take another look at a project that Deanne was part of that you might recognize from around the city. Again, she spoke very eloquently and articulately about her practice, but to think about those big ideas for our younger audiences, we can think about, she was saying, where do images, shapes, and symbols, where do they come from? Again, how do they move around the world? And how do they influence how we understand the world around us? So has anybody seen this before? If you look at this image, does anyone recognize it?
I definitely do, as a person who always takes transit.
I am also a transit taker myself. So this was a project that was done by the Contemporary Art Gallery in collaboration with TransLink. And I want to thank the Contemporary Art Gallery as well for allowing us to share this image today. So this was a really awesome project. And the idea was to think about the connections between images and movement in new ways. So they even, when this project started, they even did the artist talks right on the bus as they were moving through the city, experiencing the city together. And from the Contemporary Art Gallery's website, they state, buses and trains are not the only transit systems that we navigate in our daily lives. Visual images constantly transport ideas and meaning from one place to another. So again, thinking of Deanne's bigger ideas of transporting how ideas and meaning move through images and how that travels around the world. So if we look at that artwork again, that's actually on view at the Vancouver Art Gallery right now. If we take a look at the next slide, this is the work that had an impact on Doaa. So this work is called Venciones, Fragmentary Creature, and it was created between 2014 and 2016. And it's actually, it'll be on view until November 1st in the gallery in the exhibition, The Tin Man Was a Dreamer, Allegories, Poetics, and Performances of Power. And one reason that it's so fantastic to actually go and be with the artwork, instead of just seeing it in an image, is you can get a sense of scale. So you can kind of see from this picture, it's taking up an entire gallery wall. So it's really, really large scale. So maybe I think what we can do, what do you think about maybe we'll look up close at these artworks so we can get a sense of those images, symbols, and shapes that Deanne is interrogating. So I'm going to ask everyone now who's here with us, you can type your answers in the chat, just those open questions. So what do you notice? What do you notice when we look up close in this section of the work? What do you notice when you look right up at this section, Doaa?
There's so many layers. Like, I bet it was like very complex. Like the pen line work is also very intricate, and I just like how she like used, you know, lines that created by pen to like create shades and shadows and stuff like that. The colors are very like muted. Yeah.
Almost says it looks like
dragon.
It reminds you of a dragon or mythological animal. So we're kind of seeing, we know it's called fragmentary creature. So we're getting that reference to like a creature. We also have someone saying dragons and tusks. Aswin was saying dragons and tusks. Interesting you said tusks because as Doaa mentioned when she was describing Deanne's work, she found books that had images. They were actually illustrations of hunting for game. So seeing images of piles and piles of tusks, seeing images of animals in pain really spoke to Deanne, and she traced these images over and over again. So some of them are actually tusks in there. They're imagined creatures. They're also real creatures as well. I'm also noticing a lot of the patterns too. So if you look at the bottom, you see those repeated shapes and patterns. Kind of at the bottom to the right, I can see why some of you would say it kind of looks like dragons. We see almost like scales. And again, I agree with you, the layers make it look like such a rich story is going on here. Something is happening that has a lot of history, but a lot of building as well. And Jasmine also noticed fish scale. So yeah, so it could be dragon scales, it could also be fish scales. So thinking about combining the real and the imagined world as well. Oh, and Francis is saying the eyes of the creatures draw you in. So everybody look for some of those eyes. Because at first, sometimes I just noticed the lines and shapes and layers. But then you realize, okay, these are actually creatures. So Lee, you noticed a red rhino. And now if I look for those eyes, I can kind of see a rhino as well. I can see kind of like a dragon head too. And I also love looking for those lines, those really, really detailed lines.
Yeah.
So, oh, a fishtail or the bottom of a mermaid, someone else is mentioning too. So again, combining the imaginary and the real worlds together. So again, that idea of an imagined Indonesia, the way that images of Indonesia have traveled across the world and people perceive them in ways or think about them in ways that may or may not be accurate. So thinking about combining imaginary and real. And it's also called fragmentary creature. So fragment means like a piece of something, not the whole. So I don't know if Deanne intended this, but that makes me think of they're just pieces of different creatures, or just pieces, and in a way, maybe pieces of cultures are represented rather than a whole. So she's doing a lot of printmaking here. They look like drawings, but they're actually lithograph prints. As she mentioned in the video, she studied printmaking in school. And again, we mentioned those animals, those creatures. Venaciones means hunting for game, like we mentioned before. So in her research, she found these books. And then we also, if you see tiny, tiny little patterns, you can see kind of circles and dots in some of her works, which is referencing directly like, kind of like old fashioned printmaking. It's called Ben-Day dots. And it's kind of like if you saw like on a dot matrix printer a little while ago, a few years ago, where the colors are made up of like dot, 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 dot. And some artists actually use that to reference a history of printmaking. And she also talks about, she's not just interested in the process of printmaking, but the idea of printmaking as a way to repeat images over and over and over and spread them in different ways. So unless anyone else has any questions or ideas, feel free to jump in. Maybe we could hear Diane speak one more time about her interest in how we interpret her work in many, many different ways. We can take a look at her video.
I try and make work that is approachable from a number of different places, so that one person might look at it and appreciate its attention to detail or its use of color, but someone who's from Indonesia might immediately recognize some of the elements and kind of know the backstory of that, but yet someone from a different place might know a totally different element. And so that I'm hoping that it doesn't have just a single reading, but that different people can look at it and get different things out of it and then try and kind of make up their own understanding based on how I've put things together.
So this is where we get to see how artists are inspired by other artists. And maybe what we can do is take a look at the work that you have created. And maybe if you want to speak a little bit, about the process of how you got those ideas and how kind of your ideas that you were thinking about reclaiming your cultural and spiritual identity, and how ideas from Diana Chiari's work resonated with you, all came together to create a special project for this session today.
Yeah. I gotta say, this project was super fun. Like, I was thinking about like all the questions that we, Christina and I talked and stuff like that. So it was quite something to like really dig deep and see all the symbols that could represent my identity. Okay, so first layer, I was really inspired by Diane's work and how she used like multiple layers to create some depth and stuff like that. So combining Diane's work and Tayi's words, I wanted to have a layer that frames this artwork. I used square Arabic script. This one here says my family name, which is different from my legal name. Only recently I learned that my parents decided to not take this family name as theirs because of all the possible discrimination that they could face because of it. So I definitely wanted to start with that as my step one to reclaiming this part of my identity. And then you can see at the video. And then, yeah, I did the Arabic script in Illustrator. I printed it and kind of like cut it out to, again, make that stencil that could be use as a frame, or I wasn't really sure how I'm gonna use it, so I kind of let it sit aside. I reused some of the Islamic patterns that I did for previous projects, and as you can see, like I drew 3 big mountains just to represent the 3 physical places that I've been in this world. And then I was like trying to figure out what the stencil gonna sit on the artwork, just trying to figure out what symbols to add and where. Didn't really end up working well, but I kind of like traced that back and just stick to symbols. I used as you can see, I like forgot a pencil in my hair. I used like some like mountains, some symbols from my Yemeni heritage, from Saudi. I used some of the geese symbols that we talked about before from the Indigenous community to just represent Vancouver and where I'm at right now. As you can see, like I used the crescent symbol to represent my Muslim identity, right? And you can see it throughout, like from left to right. I use like different colors. Watercolor is kind of really forgiving and easy to work with. And then we see the final work and all the snacks that you can see in my desk. And then the final picture of the artwork is like, as you can see, like the 3 mountains. The one in the middle represent my Yemeni heritage, which is kind of in the background of my life. It's not super dominant. But then you can see the bigger mountain is basically Saudi Arabia, where I was born and like lived most of my life. You see like this little part of a building that I would always like pass by whenever I would go like run errands or like hang out with my friends in Jubail. You can see the crescent kind of present in the moon, like higher up, because that was really kind of like a key part of my identity. You can see some of the patterns that Saudi textile use. In my hometown, there's a lot of palm trees, so I added some there. One of my favorite like months during when I stayed in Saudi was Ramadan, where we would fast. And that kind of like really brought all the family, all the friends together. Like it was such a sense of community that you can never really find anywhere. So I added a little like prayer beads and stuff like that. And then you could see like some of the Islamic patterns that I added. I added some symbols to create like to represent nature, which I've like been so super lucky to experience here in Vancouver, BC. Yeah, the colors are basically, I kind of wanted something complementary to each other, but I also wanted each color to represent, again, the physical space that I've been in. This like orange red color, you find it in a lot of Yemeni textiles or like art pieces. The blue, I was thinking about nature here in Vancouver, and the yellowish color was to represent Saudi Arabia. There's a lot of like use of ceramics and stuff like that take that color. So I thought together they create such a beautiful color combination, if you would. Yeah. And then I think there's one more where I placed the stencil on top of it. I was kind of experimenting with the different layers and how would that look like on top of the artwork. There's one picture after this that has a like transparent, yeah, it's like transparent stencil, and then the next one would be just like the white stencil, solid stencil of my family name. Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you for putting so much thought and care and love poured into this project. I just learned so much about you just in you describing how you came up with your ideas and the process of this project, even though we've already talked about it.
We did, yeah.
So much about you, and that just speaks to the power, well, the questions that you're asking of yourself too, about reclaiming your cultural and spiritual identity. And for everyone who's watching today, you can think about ways that you can do that as well, and think about what shapes and images that you can use, where do those shapes and images come from, and how can you really reclaim them as your own to express your unique identity. So I really want to thank you for sharing this with us.
Of course, yeah.
And it just speaks to the power art practice.
Absolutely. And like identity always evolves, right? Like it grows. So I'm pretty sure like, I don't know, a few years from now, I would have more symbols and stuff to represent my identity as a person in Vancouver. So I would probably have more of that in my artwork if I ever decide to do that again. So I think that's the beauty of identity. It keeps like evolving, changing. And honestly, though, while I was doing the artwork, I remembered like more memories, more symbols. I'm like, oh, okay, I want to add this, I want to add that. And I think that kind of took me down like a long road of like just memories, reminiscing, and just like I spent a lot of time just like creating symbols while I was in Saudi Arabia, because that's kind of where the warm, fuzzy memories are. Yeah.
Well, I mean, reclaim is a verb, right? So it's a process that's always
Yes.
ongoing and transforming. So I appreciate you saying that as well.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this is where we want to thank not just you, Doaa, for joining us today, for sharing, as I said, so kindly and genuinely
Thank you for
and
having me.
with
Yeah,
such
absolutely.
passion. We also want to thank again Simon Fraser University Center for Comparative Muslim Studies for making this possible. Thank you again to Canada Life for your support of art education at the Vancouver Art Gallery. Thank you to Asa, who has been helping us, supporting in the background. We're doing all of the technical things today. And most of all, thank you all for joining us, for choosing to spend your time with us, for choosing to connect with us, to talk about the power of artwork and the power of conversation about artwork as well, to connect to each other, to get to know each other better and share our experiences. So I hope this helped you think about ways that you too can reclaim, can express your own identity through art and discussions. And I hope you can stay connected to each other and the world around you, but through art. So thank you all very much. And
thank you, Christina. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.